So today is the start of Holy Week. So last week we kind of cheated. Richard let me know that I did it wrong time and time again. Last week we looked at the triumphal entry, Jesus coming into Jerusalem on a colt. And we got from there that Jesus is very clearly showing himself to be king, right? It's very clear from the imagery and the scripture that he's alluding to. Well, today what we're going to be focusing on and seeing is Jesus as Savior. And so what we're going to be looking at is the night that Jesus is going to be betrayed. If you remember, on that night, Jesus is praying in Gethsemane. His disciples, he has to tell them to stay awake praying, and they keep on falling asleep. And then eventually Judas comes and brings soldiers with him to take him to ultimately die on a cross, right? Well, before that, he has a meal with his disciples. One that we're prescribed to take, and one that in 1 Corinthians 11, Jesus is said by Paul, "Do this in remembrance of me." And so this is where we get the Lord's Supper, and we're actually going to be looking at Matthew's account in Matthew chapter 26. So if you have your Bibles, you can start flipping there. We'll be in Matthew chapter 26. Now, when it comes to the Lord's Supper, it's a meal that probably for some of us, we have a little bit of baggage, if you want to use that word. We've done it multiple times. It's probably become a little stale, a little robotic. Some of us in here, we have different opinions about how it should be taken, specifically the details. I've heard the opinions, so I know we have different opinions in here. Thankfully, no one's been pushy or mean about it. But regardless of how we feel about the details, the truths of the gospel are still clear, and it's a reminder for us of the gospel, our need of the gospel, and the implications of the gospel. And so that's what we're going to look today. We're going to look at Matthew, and we're going to use that as a framework for us as we take the Lord's Supper today. And so I know some of us, we've eaten, we're probably a little dizzy, a little tired. And so I'm going to read 17 through 39 or 29. But as I do that, let's go ahead and all stand as I read, so that you're nice and awake. Okay, starting in verse 17. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me.' And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, 'Is it I, Lord?' He answered, 'He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born.' Judas, who would betray him, answered, 'Is it I, Rabbi?' He said to him, 'You have said so.' Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.'" You can be seated. So this passage that we're looking at today, we're going to break it up into 3 parts, and as we do that, we're going to use that as our framework for our time in taking the Lord's Supper. So 17 through 19. It's the day that Jesus is going to be betrayed. He's going to be betrayed later that night. And you even see it where Jesus goes and tells his disciples to go to this guy and have this room prepared. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell that guy, my time is at hand. And so Jesus, he's going to be betrayed less than 12 hours from now. Now, during this time, it's the week of Passover. If you remember what that is, it's the remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. There were the 10 plagues. The last one, the firstborn was to be killed unless they had a lamb's blood over their doorpost, and God would pass over the land of Egypt. And so this was a remembrance of that sign and the Exodus from Egypt. Now, what it was typical about the Passover feast was that it was a familial feast. What I mean by that is that families would usually take this meal together. They even had different roles for different people. One kid would go and look for Elijah and all that stuff. And so it was very familial in that sense. Now, these disciples and Jesus, they weren't with their family. They were from Galilee. It doesn't mention that people's wives or kids were there or anything like that. But Jesus goes and he tells these disciples to go build up find this room, and we'll have the Passover together. And so, to some extent, what this points to is the familial aspect of the church. I know the church, it doesn't seem like it's a family at times. We seem like we're more of acquaintances. But listen to what Jesus says in Matthew 12, 46 through 50. It says, "While he was still speaking to the people, behold, his mother and brothers stood outside, asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, 'Who are my mother and who are my brothers?' And stretching out his hand towards his disciples, he said, 'Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and mother.'" Even when we put our faith in Christ, what are we considered? An acquaintance of God, a foreigner of God. John 1:12, "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." And even in Ephesians, when Paul is talking about the church and becoming members of the church, he's not saying, hey, you've become part of this organization that meets once a week. He mentions it as you're a member of the household of God. And if you've read the letters, how does Paul refer to the church? As brothers and sisters. You see, as we gather every Sunday, but especially as we come and take the Lord's Supper, we are to regard the church as family. Now, think about for a second the good news in that. I know a lot of us in here, we have perfect families, like no baggage whatsoever with our parents. If your parents are in here, don't look at them right now. But a lot of us, we have baggage with family, right? Some of us, we've even had to abandon our family to follow Jesus. We've had to abandon their love for the gospel. But you have a new family. When your physical family does not love you, guess what? This family of God, it's not just feeling like it, to love you when they feel like it. We are commanded to love you, right? And so the question is that before we take the Lord's Supper, are we acting like a true family? Or are we just another type of family that just adds baggage to those that come through these doors? Church history shows that the latter happens quite often. But are we, as First Baptist, are we acting like a family or just acquaintances? Jesus is going to eat with his family. But he's still heading to the cross, and that takes us to his betrayal. And That's not a surprise to him. So let me reread 20 through 25. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He said to him, "You have said so." So clearly Jesus, knowing that he's about to be betrayed, shows he's God with his foreknowledge, and even the plan of his betrayal, it was God's will to begin with, because he says, as it is written, the Son of Man will be delivered, right? And we know that Judas is the one that betrays him. And so when Jesus throws this out here that he's going to be betrayed, all his disciples are, "Is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord?" And Jesus says, "Whoever dipped his hand in the dish will betray me." So more than likely, this was a communal dish that people would dip their bread or their meat in, and it was a communal dish. And so Jesus, he's narrowing it down to this group of 12 people. And Judas, he asks if it's him differently than the other ones. I don't know if you noticed that. All the disciples say, "Is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord?" Judas says, "Is it I, Rabbi?" It's interesting. It's never recorded that Judas ever says Lord in the context of Jesus. We talked about that last week, but that's something that you need to think about as well. When it comes to Jesus, is he just a rabbi, a teacher? Is he just a good man, or is he Lord? This is pointing to Judas not getting it. And so he says, "Rabbi, is it I?" And Jesus has this interesting response, "You have said so." And so what he's doing, he's deflecting the responsibility back towards Judas. "Lord," or "Rabbi, is it I?" "You've said so." That's what's going on right there. Is he's deflecting, he's affirming that it is Judas by Judas's own admission. Now, we know if you looked a few verses ahead of the passage that we read, that Judas had already betrayed Jesus. It's a already happening, but also going to happen type of event. Judas went to the Pharisees already. And we know in John's account, right after this affirmation that Judas is the one that's going to betray Jesus, we know that Satan enters him, and Jesus says, "Go and do as you have planned." And so Judas leaves. What a huge tragedy. This guy who has been with Jesus for 3 years has already betrayed him. He's betraying him again at this familial meal. But it's not the only tragedy right now. In verse 22, it says that all the disciples were very sorrowful. They were grieved. And they said, "Is it I, Lord?" Like that's really interesting. Like, if someone came in here right now and was like, someone in this room right now is going to start breakdancing, I'd probably be sorrowful and grieved, like, that's weird. But I'm not going to be like, "Oh, is it me?" I'm not going to do that. And so this is pointing out something that within the disciples, and it's pointing something out that within all of us as well. You see, the reality is they all end up betraying Jesus. When Jesus went to the cross, who was with him? Just himself. He was by himself. Peter later will be told that he's going to deny Jesus 3 times. And what is Peter's response? "Oh, they'll all turn away, but I won't." But before the rooster crows 3 times, not even 12 hours later, Peter denies Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times. See, the reality is that we have all betrayed Jesus within the last week, if not already today. For example, last week we just talked about how Jesus is king. Jesus is the one that we rules our lives, that we submit to. But then we struggle with sin and we fail. We struggle with lust. We worship other things. We don't do everything to the glory of God as his word says. Some of us in here, we make resolutions every Sunday, like, oh God, this week I am going to read your word every day. But then for some of us, this is probably the first time we've even heard God's word all week, right? God, I'm going to pray every day. If you were paying attention, maybe you've prayed once today. Even with the family of God, we know we're supposed to love one another. But we drop the ball on that. Some of us, we have straight up conflict with one another, and we don't deal with it. Like, hear what Jesus has to say with conflict in Matthew 5:23-24. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gifts. Regardless if it's sin, regardless if it's not loving the church, regardless if it's ignoring conflict resolution, we come together as a church and act like nothing's wrong. When the reality is that we've betrayed Jesus at some point in the last 10 hours. And so as we come and take the Lord's Supper, we need to reflect on our own betrayal. How have you fallen? How have you failed? How have you struggled to follow the Lord lately? So let us regard the church as family and reflect on our betrayal. But as sad of a note that may be, we get to the meal, and that's the good news. Let me read 26-29. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So we have the bread and we have the drink. The bread, it's not literally Jesus' body. I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but it symbolizes Jesus' body, okay? His body, which will be broken. His body, which will be broken on the cross for every person's sin. See, the betrayal that we have done towards God all throughout our life, there were wages for it. And no one here wants to pay those wages. Not a single person. But Jesus, he paid the price for your sins. And then we have the drink, more than likely wine. Don't worry, we're going to do grape juice. He says that this is his blood. Specifically, it says it's the blood of the covenant. This is more than likely an allusion to Jeremiah 31:31-34. I'll go ahead and read that. It says, "Before the days are coming, declares the Lord, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with the fathers of the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, 'Know the Lord,' for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquities, and I will remember their sin no more. And so this is a new covenant that's being made, one where there's a permanent relationship between a righteous, perfect God and sinful people. One where people aren't going to just hear about God, but they will actually know God. And we get to do that through the indwelling of the Spirit. And one where sins will be forgiven. Jesus' blood will be spilt for the forgiveness of sins. The author of Hebrews says in 9:22 that without the shedding of blood, there can be no forgiveness of sins. And so really, when we take the Lord's Supper, like, yes, we want to consider the family of God. We want to look back on our sin, on how we've betrayed our Lord and Savior. But we also want to remember Jesus. Judas, at this time during the supper, he's gone. Everyone else, they will betray Jesus. But they're all still there. They're all still taking part in this meal. And as I already said, Jesus knew it. He knew that he would die alone on that cross. He knew every single person would abandon him. This covenant that we have been brought into is an everlasting covenant. Like, think of it this way. 2,000 years ago, Jesus died for your sins. 2,000 years later, you were born. A few years later, you put your faith in Christ. For what sins did Jesus die for? All of them, right? You see, Jesus is instituting a new covenant with a new people through his death on the cross. This is a relationship with God forever. And it's possible because Jesus was the perfect sacrifice regardless of your sin, regardless if you've been failing in following the Lord, regardless if you've been failing in loving the church. And this is a covenant that we need to be reminded of often. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to take part in the Lord's Supper. Many of us, we need to reflect, and we need to confess our sins to God. We need to be in agreement with God. But instead of doing this in a large group like we normally do, we're going to do it by our tables. And so what this is going to look like is at your tables, I want you to just pray for one another. Maybe there's a struggle that you have, a sin that you need to confess. Pray for one another. Whether it's everyone praying or just one praying, that's up to you at your table. But start with prayer. And then, after that, you have bread on your tables, and there's juice right here. You can just have one person come and grab the juice. I want you to break your bread, symbolizing the body of Jesus that was broken for you, and then pass the juice around and just dip it for the blood that was poured out for you, the blood of the covenant. Take the bread, dip it, eat it, and then also close at your table in prayer with thanksgiving. That's what Jesus does with the bread and the juice, is he gives thanks. And so let's give thanks afterwards, and that'll also let me know when you're done. But again, here's the thing. At your tables, you can do this however you want. You can take this as seriously as you want. But if we want today to be special, it's going to take a little effort so that this doesn't become just a spectacle. I will point out that in 1 Corinthians, when people have not taken the Lord's Supper seriously, they were usually sick. So let us also honor the Lord in taking this seriously in that way. And so I'll pray now, then you can, the steps should be on the slideshow, but then afterwards, after I get a sense that most people are done, I'll come up, pray, and then we will sing just as they did in verse 30. Right after they took this supper, they sung a hymn. And so I'll pray, and then you can get started. Father, I just thank you for your gospel. I thank you that it's not just something that we reflect on about a past event, that we made some sort of decision or anything like that, but it's something that's applicable to our lives now. God, we say time and time again that we'll follow you, that we love you, and then at some point our actions prove otherwise. We do that with your commands. We do that with your bride. We say that we love your bride, and then we don't. But your body was still broken, and your blood was still poured out for us. And so I pray that that's something that we remember, that we walk in. And I pray that we just remember this gospel and are transformed by it. Thank you for sending Jesus to save us and live the life we couldn't. And it's in his name I pray. Amen.